Hello everyone. I want to start this session with a short story. Several years ago, around 10 years back, a close friend of mine who was a highly qualified professional working also in medical affairs told me something that genuinely surprised me. She said that her dream job was to move into a role in drug safety or medical information. At the time, I didn't understand it. I asked her, why would someone with strong scientific training and experience in medical affairs would aspire to move to roles that are largely administrative in nature? Her answer was very simple and very honest. She told me these are the safest jobs in medical affairs and in the pharmaceutical industry overall. As long as you do your job, no one can fire you. The workload is predictable, the tasks are repetitive, and most importantly, safety and medical information are critically needed for compliance with regulatory authorities like the FDA and the European Medicines Agency. That's why people can stay in these roles, she said, for years, sometimes decades, without being asked to move or change. Maybe, I don't know, maybe at that time her reasoning made sense. But wait a second. That conversation happened long before the rise of artificial intelligence. Today, if we revisit the same discussion, it feels almost out of context. Why? Because artificial intelligence can already automate and optimize large parts of work in drug safety and medical information. Tasks such as case processing, literature screening, query, triage, document generation, standard responses. These are very structured, repeatable activities which makes them highly suitable for automation and optimization. However, the same cannot be said for other roles in medical affairs. Medical affairs relies heavily on human judgment, scientific interpretation, ethical decision making, and meaningful scientific exchange. These are not areas where artificial intelligence can operate independently or responsibly. This story is very important because it reflects where many industries, not only pharmaceuticals, are heading today. Artificial intelligence is offering organizations very powerful tools to automate processes, reduce costs, and streamline operations. That's a fact. And yes, for roles that are mainly administrative in nature, this can be uncomfortable news. But it's not the full story. Recently, I shared the two important and recent publications that came out. I think the first one was published in October 2025, and the second was published early December 2025. Both studies examined the role and value of artificial intelligence in healthcare. And both studies, and actually these were reviews that looked into hundreds of studies, reached together a very consistent conclusion. Artificial intelligence delivers value only when it is guided, supervised, and applied by human expertise. Scientific acumen, my friends, contextual understanding, ethical judgment, and accountability remain firmly human responsibilities. And this brings us to the core question of today's session. Should we welcome artificial intelligence in the pharmaceutical industry as a way to improve efficiency and streamline our operations? Or should we be concerned about losing jobs to automation? Let's explore both sides. And here we will look at what artificial intelligence can do, what it cannot do, which roles are more exposed to change, and which skills will become more valuable than ever for medical affairs. So let's take it step by step. First, let's answer the question why this question is being asked now and not 10 or 20 years ago, especially that artificial intelligence have existed in some form for decades. What has changed now is not the idea, but the speed, accessibility, and scale at which this is being applied. Tasks that once required days of manual work can now be completed in minutes. Processes that needed entire teams can now be supported by a few number of people using intelligent systems. This shift is happening across industries, and the pharmaceutical industry is no exception. Pharmaceutical organizations operate in an environment that is complex, highly regulated, and extremely data driven. We have safety databases, medical information inquiries, clinical trial documentation, regulatory submissions, post-marketing surveillance, and all these generate massive volumes of structured data. From an organizational perspective, this creates a very strong case for automation and optimization. At the same time, companies are facing increasing pressure to reduce costs, pressure to move faster, and also pressure to do more with fewer resources. We all know that. Artificial intelligence, in fact, can provide solution to all these three parameters. And this is where the concern naturally begins. Accordingly, many of us hear the term artificial intelligence and immediately think in terms of job replacement. But this is a critical misunderstanding, in fact. Artificial intelligence doesn't replace jobs in one sudden step. It replaces specific tasks within the roles, especially tasks that are repetitive, rule-based, and predictable. This distinction is very important because two people can hold the same job title, but their day-to-day work can look completely different. One may spend most of their time processing information, documenting, and probably following predefined workflows. The other may spend their time interpreting data, engaging in scientific discussion, making judgment-based decisions, and navigating ambiguity. Artificial intelligence impacts these two profiles differently. The real risk is not associated with job title. The real risk is associated with how much of a role is built on repeatable tasks versus human judgment. And this is where many of us can make a mistake. We focus on whether a role will disappear instead of asking a more useful question. Which parts of my work could be automated, and which parts require human expertise? Understanding this shift from jobs to tasks is the foundation of everything we will discuss today. Because once we understand what artificial intelligence is actually good at, we can clearly see where it adds value, where it creates risk, and where human professionals remain indispensable. To have an honest discussion about jobs and artificial intelligence, we first need to be very clear about what artificial intelligence is actually good at, and just as importantly, where it consistently reaches its limits. Artificial intelligence excels in environments where data is structured, rules are defined, and patterns repeat at scale. In the pharmaceutical industry, there are many of such areas. Examples may include large safety databases, medical information repositories, clinical trial records, regulatory documentation. All these involve massive volumes of data that must be processed accurately and consistently. In these settings, artificial intelligence can work faster than humans, without fatigue, and with a high level of consistency and accuracy. It can screen thousands of documents, flag potential safety signals, categorize inquiries, and support standardized responses. These capabilities make artificial intelligence extremely valuable for operational efficiency. Artificial intelligence is also very effective at identifying patterns that are difficult for humans to detect manually. For example, it can analyze trends across thousands of adverse event reports, or highlight, for example, recurring themes across large data sets. And if used correctly, This can support earlier detection of issues and better informed decision making. However, this is where the strength of artificial intelligence stops and its limitation begin. Because artificial intelligence doesn't understand science in the human sense. It doesn't understand context, intent, or consequences. It doesn't weigh uncertainty the way trained professionals does. And it doesn't carry responsibilities or decisions that impact patients, healthcare professionals, or regulatory trust. In the pharmaceutical work, decisions are not binary. They are often based on incomplete data, evolving evidence, complex clinical judgment, and the machines can only surface information but cannot decide what that information means in real world scientific or ethical context. This limitations becomes especially important in medical affairs. Scientific exchange with healthcare professionals requires more than accurate data. It requires interpretation, credibility, adaptability, and trust. And this interaction involves listening, probing questions, challenging assumptions, responding to questions, capabilities that artificial intelligence cannot replicate naturally and independently. There is also the issue of accountability, and this is really very important because in a regulated industry like the pharmaceutical one, responsibility cannot be delegated to an algorithm. Regulatory authorities will not understand or accept the term that the system decided as an explanation, not in the pharmaceutical industry. Human oversight, scientific ownership, and ethical accountability remain non negotiable. This is why artificial intelligence should be viewed as supporting system, not a replacement for professional expertise. When it is used correctly, it can enhance the human performance, indeed. But if used incorrectly, it can create risk. Understanding this balance is important because once we know what artificial intelligence can do well and where it cannot operate alone, we can start to clearly identify which tasks are most likely to be automated and which human roles will continue to be essential. Now that we understand what artificial intelligence does well, let's apply this knowledge to the real pharmaceutical workflows. The key point to remember before we start is this: artificial intelligence doesn't replace entire roles at once. It targets specific tasks, especially tasks that are repetitive, rule based, and high in volume. One of the most exposed areas in the pharmaceutical industry is the routine data processing. Tasks such as intake of adverse event reports, initial case triage, data coding, and reconciliations follow predefined rules and they follow also structured formats. And artificial intelligence can support or automate large parts of this work with high speed, consistency, with reducing manual effort and turnaround time. Another area is the standard medical information activities. Frequently asked questions, approved response documents, and literature retrieval, these all can be handled efficiently by intelligence systems. When inquiries follow predictable patterns and rely on approved content, artificial intelligence can assist in drafting responses, for example, or directing queries to the appropriate information source. Another area is the literature screening and categorization. This is also highly suitable for automation. Artificial intelligence can scan thousands and thousands of publications, identify relevant abstracts. It can categorize topics, flag potential relevance, and so on. This doesn't replace the scientific review, but it significantly reduces the tasks that depend on manual workload and requires to get to the meaningful content. Another area is the routine documentation and reporting tasks. Generating standard reports, populating templates, tracking metrics, and monitoring operational performance can be largely automated by artificial intelligence. These activities are necessary, yes, but they don't require continuous scientific interpretation or decision making. And maybe you have noticed what all these tasks have in common. It is not their importance, but their structure. They are predictable, they follow rules, they repeat at scale, and they can be clearly defined. This is why these tasks are more exposed to automation and optimization, not because they lack the value, but because they can be standardized. It is also important to clarify what automation actually means in real practice. Because in most cases, artificial intelligence doesn't remove the human from the process. It reduces manual steps, accelerates workflows, and allows us to focus on higher value activities such as interpretation, strategy, and engagement. The real risk emerges when a role becomes dominated by automated tasks, leaving little space for scientific judgment, contextual thinking, or human interaction. In such cases, the role itself may need to evolve, and this understanding prepares us for the next logical question. If some tasks are becoming automated, which roles will change the most, and which ones are likely to remain essential? Let's try to answer this question practically. Once tasks begin to shift, roles will also start to evolve. But evolution doesn't mean disappearance. In the pharmaceutical sector, the roles that will change the most are not defined by their titles, but by how much of their work is built around automation friendly tasks versus human judgment and scientific exchange. Roles that are heavily focused on operation execution and standardized processes are likely to experience the greatest transformation. And if we look around us, we will see that in areas such as drug safety operations and medical information support, artificial intelligence is increasingly being used to handle initial workflows, triage, documentation, and routine responses. And as a result, these roles gradually shifting away from manual processing and toward oversight, quality review, and exception management. This doesn't eliminate the need for professionals in these functions. Instead, it changes the nature of their work. Fewer people may be required to do repetitive tasks, while more emphasis is placed on governance, compliance, and critical review. On the other hand, roles that rely on scientific interpretation, strategic thinking, and human interaction are far less likely to be replaced. Medical affairs roles, for example, such as MSLs, medical advisors, medical managers, fall well into this category. These roles require the ability to interpret evolving data, engage in meaningful scientific dialogues with healthcare professionals, challenge assumptions, adapt messages based on context. They also require trust, credibility, and ethical responsibility. These are qualities that cannot be automated. Similarly, roles in regulatory strategies, clinical development leadership, and benefit risk assessment depending on judgment under uncertainty. While artificial intelligence can definitely support these roles by surfacing insights and scenarios, the final decision remains human led. What becomes clear is that artificial intelligence reshapes roles by elevating expectations, not by removing responsibility. And so, we are expected to move away from transactional activities and toward higher value contributions. This shift creates a dividing line, not between jobs that will disappear and jobs that will survive, but between professionals who adapt and those who remain tied to tasks that no longer define value. And this leads us to another practical question. If roles are changing, what skills will protect careers and create opportunities in the age of artificial intelligence. Because as artificial intelligence reshapes tasks and roles, one thing becomes very clear. Careers will not be protected by job titles or years of experience alone. They will be protected by skills, especially those that cannot be automated. The most critical skill for us in medical affairs is the scientific judgment, because this ability to interpret data in context and understand its limitation, translate evidence into meaningful conclusions. Artificial intelligence cannot do this. Artificial intelligence definitely can support to surface patterns, generate outputs, but it will not decide what those outputs means for key opinion leaders or for healthcare professionals or for patients. The second most important skill is strategic thinking and data-driven decision making. Because pharmaceutical decisions rarely exist in isolation. They are influenced by disease burden, unmet needs, treatment pathways, local guidelines, regulatory explanations, and ethical considerations. So understanding how all these elements connect is a uniquely human capability, and one that artificial intelligence cannot replicate independently. Additionally, as automation removes routine tasks, we are expected to contribute at a higher level to prioritize initiatives, align activities with the medical strategy, and to demonstrate impact. Artificial intelligence can support the planning, but it cannot own a strategy or make value-based trade-offs. Another essential skill is the high-quality scientific communication. Because in medical affairs, value is created through discussions, through a dialogue, not data alone. Engaging with healthcare professionals requires listening, asking the right question, adapting to different perspectives, and building trust over time. These interactions involve credibility and relationship building, areas where human presence is irreplaceable. Another very important skill is the ability to work with artificial intelligence, not to compete against it. Understanding how these systems work, where their output can be trusted, and where human oversight is required will be a key differentiator. Those of us who can bridge scientific expertise with intelligent tools will be far more valuable than those who would avoid them. Finally, ethical responsibility and accountability. These remain central. In a regulated industry, decisions must be explainable, defensible, and aligned with patient safety and compliance standards. Artificial intelligence doesn't carry accountability. People do. So, we can say that these skills together can define the future ready pharmaceutical professional. This brings us to the final reflection of today's discussion. Should artificial intelligence be seen as a threat or as an opportunity to redefine value in the pharmaceutical industry? If we step backward and look at everything we discussed today, the answer becomes more balanced and more useful, I think, than a simple yes or no. Artificial intelligence will not replace the industry, and it will not suddenly eliminate roles across medical affairs, clinical development, or regulatory functions. What it will do is continue to replace tasks, especially those that are repetitive, predictable, and rule-based. For some roles, this means significant change. For others, it means elevation. In areas where work has traditionally been operational and administrative, artificial intelligence will reduce manual workload and reshape how teams are structured. This can feel uncomfortable, definitely, but it also creates an opportunity to move away from the routine execution toward the oversight, quality, and decision making. In medical affairs and other science driven functions, the impact is different. Artificial intelligence becomes a tool that can accelerate insight generation, support evidence review, and enhance efficiency, but it doesn't replace the scientific judgment, human interaction, or ethical responsibility. The real dividing line is not in technology, it's in adaptability. And those of us who will continue to define their value by tasks that can be automated will feel increasing pressure. But on the other hand, those who will invest in scientific acumen, strategic thinking, communication, and contextual judgment will find themselves more relevant, not less. So, the more important question is not whether artificial intelligence will take jobs, but whether we are willing to evolve with it. And remember, artificial intelligence is not here to remove human expertise from the pharmaceutical industry. It is here to challenge us to use that expertise at a higher level. And the future will belong to those professionals who understand both the science and the technology, who can really work alongside intelligent systems and who take ownership of the decisions that truly matter, decisions that can affect the patients, healthcare professionals, and the public trust. And this is not a future to fear, it's a future to prepare for. Thank you for watching and see you next time.